Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to episode 4. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the universal laws, consciousness, and quantum theory, and how we can use some of these principles to be able to help life be just that little bit more smooth for us. So I'll just start first with a bit of the background. So where does this come from? So the great universal laws actually originated in ancient Egypt, where there's believed to have been a man that derived such wisdom that he became a god, and that god was revered as Thoth. He bought the hieroglyphic structures, the little pictures that you often see in old ancient Egyptian writings, and he's the one that's seen as the scribe with the ibis head. So that's the god Thoth that was the first to have written and spoken about the ways that energy functions within the universe. The ancient Greeks at the time very much revered the ancient Egyptians, and so took on a lot of their teachings. And so one of their gods, called Hermes, carried along that same lineage of those particular teachings. So today you often hear of these universal laws called the laws of Hermes, or Hermeticism, or the Hermetic traditions, any of those sorts of things based around this Greek god called Hermes. Now these were around 2000, 3000 BC. Many of these laws are actually supported by physics and quantum science. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So, this was very popular for thousands of years, a lot of these wisdom teachings, up until around 400 Common Era, when the Romans were sent to destroy everything that wasn't, in line with their particular beliefs. There was this amazing city called Alexandria, you might have heard of, in Egypt, where they had literally, tens of thousands of wisdom writing on scrolls, and a lot of scholars, all the way from religious scholars, scientists, artists, people studying literature. All of those would come together to try and discuss the interrelationships of how all of these things possibly can contribute to some type of unified field. Unfortunately, that place got destroyed, and it threw humanity into the Dark Ages. At the time in Alexandria, the famous mathematician Pythagoras came up with a lot of his principles that we still use today in math. Plato, Socrates, all of those great ancient philosophers came from that particular time as well. And so the Earth was then put in the Dark Ages for about 1,000 years, up until the Renaissance. In Italy. So in Florence at the time, the ruler of Florence, Medici, you might have heard of him, he was responsible for sending out a lot of his troops to go and try and retrieve a lot of these lost scrolls. Because at the time when Alexandria was falling, a lot of the scrolls were dispersed all through Europe. And it wasn't until Medici sent out to start to bring some of these back together during that Renaissance period that they started to again gather different scholars and anyone, pretty much, philosophers, mystics. They even had people from the Eastern traditions, Buddhism, again coming together to try and to learn more about how everything works in the universe. And so, this went on for about, 60, 70 years. So Michelangelo, Raphael actually drew or inspired and drew their paintings and their artwork based on some of these laws and principles as well. A little sidetrack there. I just love the Michelangelo work. So where was I? So then, it was about 60 years that sort of went on again, and the Roman Catholic Church got together with the King of France and decided that, they didn't like how this republic in Florence was going, and so they, wiped all that out. And again, that sent the scholars scattered all through Europe. But by this time, a lot of the scholars were well versed enough to be able to continue their teachings all around different areas of Europe. And, you know, small pockets of these teachings continued to spring up in different places, particularly a lot around England, and also the Bohemian region, so where Czechoslovakia and Prague was another big centre at that time, because the lower parts of Europe were stuck in holy wars for you know, hundreds of years from that time as well. So, yeah, it's a fascinating history. So I'm not keeping you here for too long. I'm just going to share with you two of the, you know, probably most important, they're all important laws, but two of the laws that, you know, we can actually quite easily start to recognise functioning within our own lives, and then working with these particular concepts to actually help to create the lives that we want. The first one of those is called the law of mentalism. And so basically it's what we think we create. And, you know, you might have heard of it, you know, it's been popularized as, you know, manifesting and all of these types of things that are trendy at the moment. So, you know, the law of mentalism goes a little bit beyond that, in that the second part of that law is all is of the one mind, which means that we also need to consider the benefit for the unified whole. So we can manifest, so it's not as easy as sitting there going, oh, I want a Maserati, I want a Maserati, I want a Maserati, I want a Maserati, I want a Maserati. You know, that may not work, but, you know, if you are more creating in line with for the betterment of the collective, then it's much more likely that you'll be able to create in that way as well. You know, it sounds very lofty, but it's just really interesting when you start to recognise how this is playing out within your own life. It's like, you know, if we're fixated on you know, I hate my fat legs, I hate my fat legs, I hate my fat legs, I hate my fat legs all the time, there's no way you're not going to have fat legs, no matter what you do, because of the fact that you're putting energy into that all the time. And it's the same as, you know, saying, oh, I want to have heaps of money, I want to have heaps of money, but then in the same breath, you've got the attitude of all rich people are assholes. Excuse the swearing, sorry about that. But, you know, that's just not in alignment either. So, you know, on that level, we do have the capacity to be able to create. And, you know, when we think, you know, from a scientific perspective, everything is made up of energy. All molecules are made of energy. And it's depending on how this energy moves, depends on which state that it's actually in. So a really good example of this is if we think of water. So water is H2O, we know that, the molecular structure. And so if it's vibrating really slowly, it has a physical, it's solid, it appears physical. But even though it appears physical, it is still energy moving with a lot of space in between. Because it's moving so slowly, we're just not able to identify its actual form. But what happens then with that solid ice when we start to speed up the molecules? So we heat it up a little bit, the molecules start to vibrate a little bit more quickly, and they become liquid. And then we continue to heat it up, and they vibrate even more quickly again, and it becomes gas. So it's still H2O, but we can't see it once it's vibrating at a fast enough frequency, which is beyond the capacity of our eyes to be able to register. But it's still H2O, and it still exists. And the same as with us, with our bodies. We've got the physical that's vibrating more slowly, and then we also have the energetics of the body that we can't actually physically see. So, you know, the energy that we need for all of our cells to work, we can't actually physically see that energy. We can measure the energy, but we can't see that energy because it's moving at such a quick pace. And so it's the same as our nervous system. So how our nervous system works to help us move, the action potentials, how our central nervous system works, including the brain. So our thoughts and feelings are actually really powerful vibrations. And this was known as well in a lot of ancient traditional medicine types. So traditional Chinese medicine very strongly correlates feelings and emotions with physical dis-ease. The same as in the Vedic text, in the Ayurveda, where, you know, they look at the different chakra systems and the energy moving through that, either being able to hold the body in its natural state, which is functioning correctly, or if there's problems with the energy flowing through those particular regions, it becomes to cause physical dysfunction as well. So it's only really since, you know, this modern day science, we've really chopped off anything that, you know, is related to the energetics of anything, and we want tangible black and white. We want pills for reals, and, you know, all of this sort of thing. And so it's really only been in the last, you know, 100 years, you know, if that 150 years maximum, that, you know, this modern allopathic medicine is only dealing with physical. And, you know, it becomes to our detriment to be able to, you know, to live freely and to be able to create a life that we want as well, rather than to continue to believe that we're under control of by the system. We're under control of, oh, I'm sick, I must do what the doctor says, I must take these pills, I must go to this specialist, and, you know, have our power taken away from us. Sorry, that was a little bit off tangent, but I wanted to keep talking about the laws anyway. And, you know, a famous law that this is backed up by a really famous physics experiment you might have heard of, called the double slit experiment in quantum physics. And what this experiment has been done repeatedly, and what actually happens is they fire particles through two slits, two through slits in a metal plate, and they look at where these particles land on the backboard. And so what happens is, when they're under observation, so when the observers are expecting an outcome, the particles will actually make two lines the same shape as the slits, which is what you imagine and what you expect. And so while we're expecting that, that's the result. But then what happens is, when these particles aren't under observation in any way, that wave patterns occur on the backboard. And this is the wave of possibilities, the waves of potential that we have when we're not focused on a fixed outcome. And so when we're thinking we can't do things, we're limiting the perspective. Or when we're focused so narrowly on achieving something in a specific way, we're actually collapsing all the other possibilities, all of the other possibilities and potentials. And so this experiment has been repeated so many times, and the same thing happens, and, you know, no one is able to explain it in a modern science, tangible sort of way, other than relating it to, this is the way that energy works. Even Einstein's theory of relativity, you know, that talks about everything is relative to the observer. So again, that's back to how we're seeing things is how we relate to actually what's happening. So you can have two people with different perceptions about the same thing that are going to have completely different experiences of that same thing. So again, it's all coming back to our perspectives, what we're creating by the ways that we think about things in our lives. So one more, the law of vibration. So this is another one you would have all felt, no matter how much of a skeptic you are about any of this stuff, the law of vibration. Like, everyone's felt what we call vibes before, you know. So when we've got, say you go in a room full of people that are in a really bad mood and angry, you can feel that stuff, right? That heavy energy. And then if you go into a room where everyone's like really light and pleasant and friendly and, you know, happy, that vibe feels completely different. And so this is all about this law of vibration. And at the subatomic particles, quantum has now shown as well that these subatomic particles all have vibrating strings of energy inside these particles. And depending on the rate of vibration of those particles will determine what molecule that actually becomes. And so, our energetics, our thoughts and emotions very much determine our vibrational frequency. Because if we're constantly having bad thoughts and negative types of feelings, that's actually affecting our vibrational imprint, our frequency of what we're putting out there into the world. And conversely, the other way around, if we prefer to see, the saying, see our glass half full, we actually attract more of that to us, because energy attracts its own likeness as well. And you might have even witnessed this, one day you wake up in the morning, your alarm clock didn't go off, you slept in, you're cranky, you kick your toe, you can't find your keys, you rip your dress on the way out the door. And, this is the energy that gets created. And then, at the same time, you might wake up and, you've looked at your phone and you've got really good news. And then, you get every green light on the way to work. You get there, your boss is in a great mood, who's normally in a bad mood. You can start to really see how these energetics play out and how we can actually start to become the creators of our own destiny. So I did want to finish off with, if you do have any questions, please post any. I'm happy to answer those. And I did want to finish with a really lovely, actually I may not, we're running out of time. But what I'm going to do is I'll do this on Monday. It's a really lovely visualization, meditation that can actually help to change our frequency. And as a result of changing our frequency or our vibration, it can actually help to transform any issues that we're having. But what I'll do is I will save that for Monday evening. So if you're around on Monday evening, I'll just talk about a few things, but I'd like to just have an open forum. So if anybody has any questions about anything or would like me to, share any knowledge about anything, I've been in clinical practice for 20 years, so if I can help in any way, I will be here live from 7 until 8 at Brisbane time. So anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed my series, and please feel free to reach out and connect. I'll hopefully see you on Monday night. I do have a guide to reclaiming wellness. It's a free guide where I've summarized a lot of these principles. It's available on my website. So that's www.vitalitytime.com.au/reclaiming-wellness. So if you're interested in catching that and getting a little bit more information, that's available for you there too. Anyway, have a beautiful rest of the day. Take care. Bye.